Every night in hotels across Japan, one room stays empty. Not because it wasn't booked, not because the guest canceled, because the hotel chose not to sell it. The front desk staff know which room it is. The housekeeping staff clean around it but not inside it. New employees are told early on that room is not available. If they ask why, the answer they receive depends on who they ask and how long that person has worked there. The official reasons range from fire safety regulations to maintenance schedules to structural assessments. These explanations are plausible. They are also, in most cases, incomplete. In this video, we are going to find out why Japanese hotels leave one room empty every night. We are going to start with the reasons they tell you, and we are going to end with the reasons they don't. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let us begin. Japanese hotels give several official reasons for keeping specific rooms unavailable. Fire safety regulations in older buildings sometimes require that specific rooms adjacent to emergency infrastructure remain unoccupied. Maintenance schedules for plumbing, electrical, and HVAC systems occasionally take a specific room offline for extended periods. Structural assessments in buildings with earthquake damage or aging infrastructure can result in specific rooms being designated uninhabitable. These explanations are real. They apply to specific rooms in specific hotels under documented circumstances. If you ask the front desk why a specific room is unavailable, the official answer you receive will typically invoke one of these categories. What the official explanation does not cover is why the same room is unavailable every single night across years of operation, why the maintenance issue that justifies the unavailability is never resolved, and why the staff who give you the official answer give it in a specific tone that experienced travelers in Japan learn to recognize as the tone of a question that has been answered without being answered. In Japanese hotel management culture, there exists a category of room status that appears in internal staff communications but not in guest-facing materials. The term most commonly used is a designation that translates approximately as a room with history, a room where something occurred that the hotel has decided affects its ongoing status as a guest accommodation. The most common specific history that produces this designation is a death in the room. Not necessarily violent or dramatic, but a death that occurred during a guest's stay, under circumstances that the hotel has assessed as likely to affect future guests' experience of the space if disclosed, and equally likely to affect their experience if they discover it without disclosure. Japanese consumer law requires disclosure of deaths on properties and real estate transactions. Hotel rooms operate under different frameworks. The specific history of a specific room is the hotel's institutional knowledge to manage as it sees fit, and the management it most frequently chooses is the one where the room is simply unavailable. In Japanese hotel staff culture, transmitted through the informal channels that all institutions develop alongside their official procedures, there are specific rooms in specific hotels that have accumulated a particular status among the people who work the night shift. The status is not officially documented. It does not appear in any management communication. It is passed from experienced night shift staff to new night shift staff in the specific way that such knowledge is passed quietly, with the specific seriousness that distinguishes information being transmitted because it matters from information being transmitted as entertainment. The specific content of the transmission varies by hotel and by room. What is consistent across the accounts of night shift staff at various Japanese hotels who have spoken about it is the structure. A specific room, a specific time of night, a specific experience that occurred to a specific staff member, and the resulting agreement among the night shift that after a certain hour, that room is not entered unless the situation absolutely requires it. In the folklore of Japanese hotel management, there is a practice described as leaving a room available for a guest who checked in but never checked out. Not because the hotel expects the guest to return, but because the decision to formally close the room requires an acknowledgement of what happened to the guest, that certain hotel cultures prefer to defer indefinitely. The specific circumstances that produce this situation vary. A guest who checked in and was found dead in the room, whose checkout was never formally processed because the paperwork of death during a hotel stay involves multiple institutional actors, and the simplest administrative path is sometimes the one that leaves the room in an ambiguous status. A guest who disappeared during their stay, whose case remains open with the police, and whose room the hotel maintains in a kind of administrative limbo that the open case technically justifies. The room is made up each morning. The Do Not Disturb sign is not placed. The minibar is restocked. The guest's checkout is pending. The guest is not coming back. In Japan, the number 4 is pronounced shy, the same pronunciation as the Japanese word for death. This homophonic association has shaped Japanese building practices in ways that visitors notice without always understanding. Many Japanese hospitals, many apartment buildings, and a significant number of hotels skip the 4th floor entirely, numbering from 3 directly to 5. Others skip room number 4 on each floor. Others do both. The specific avoidance pattern varies by building age, by owner preference, and by the specific management culture of the institution. Newer buildings in major commercial centers are more likely to include the 4th floor for practical reasons. Older buildings, family-run hotels, and establishments with longer institutional memories are more likely to omit it. What is consistent is that when a Japanese hotel does include a 4th floor and does number a room 4, that room is typically the last to be booked and the most likely to be designated internally as the room that stays empty when occupancy permits any flexibility. The number carries its meaning in ways that hotel pricing and booking patterns document without explicitly acknowledging. In Japanese hotel management review systems, specific rooms consistently generate higher complaint rates for issues that are difficult to attribute to physical causes. Noise disturbances when adjacent rooms are unoccupied, temperature anomalies that the HVAC system cannot account for, the specific complaint category that hospitality management research has begun to document under the neutral designation of unexplained guest discomfort. What the review data also documents, when analyzed across sufficient time periods and sufficient hotels, is a specific subset of rooms that generate no complaints at all. Not because the room is excellent, but because the guests who stay in those rooms do not leave reviews. The pattern is consistent enough across hotels that hospitality researchers have noted it without having an explanation for it that fits within the frameworks. they use for other service quality phenomena. The rooms that generate no reviews are typically the same rooms that the hotels have considered taking offline for other reasons. The silence of the guests who stayed there is one of the data points in the decision. Traditional Japanese architecture incorporates a set of principles derived from Chinese geomantic practice that govern the orientation of buildings and the placement of specific rooms within them. The north-facing room, in this tradition, is the room that faces the direction associated with death and negative spiritual energy. In domestic architecture, the north-facing room is traditionally the room used for specific funerary practices, the room where the body was prepared, where the family gathered with the deceased, where the rituals of death were conducted before the body was removed. Modern Japanese hotels do not typically design their rooms according to traditional geomantic principles, but older buildings, converted traditional structures, and hotels built on sites with specific histories sometimes contain rooms whose orientation reflects the original function of the building before it became a hotel. The north-facing room in these hotels is often the room that is kept empty. The staff, who know the building's original function, understand why a room that faced a specific direction in the building's previous life carries a specific status in its current one. In Japanese urban legend tradition, circulating primarily through online forums beginning in the late 1990s, and amplified through social media in the 2000s and 2010s, there is a persistent category of hotel story involving a specific type of room. The room that functions as a threshold between the ordinary world and what the Japanese tradition calls the kakuryo, the hidden world of spirits and the dead. The specific mechanics of these stories vary, but the consistent element is a hotel room that functions differently from other rooms, that connects to something that other rooms do not connect to, that provides access to something that ordinary hotel rooms do not provide access to, and that the hotel keeps empty because the hotel, at some level of institutional awareness, understands that the room is not entirely under the hotel's management. These are urban legends. They are also among the most consistently reported categories of experience by guests who have stayed in specific Japanese hotels and who subsequently describe encounters that the official frameworks of hospitality management have no category for. Among the accounts that circulate within Japanese hospitality industry communities, there is a category that experienced hotel staff describe as the most unsettling, not because of what it involves, but because of how ordinary it begins. A guest checks in and requests a specific room by number, not because they have stayed in the hotel before and have a preference, but because they know the room number in advance, without having any apparent source for that knowledge. The request is sometimes made by phone before arrival, sometimes at the desk during check-in, sometimes in writing on the reservation form. The room requested is always the room that the hotel keeps empty. The hotel's management of this request varies. Some hotels accommodate the request without noting its specific nature. Some hotels decline without explanation. Some hotels ask the guest how they know about the room. The guests who are asked how they know about the room give answers that the staff who received those answers do not discuss with each other afterward. Japanese hotels undergo renovation cycles that are longer than those in Western hospitality markets. Buildings are maintained and operated for decades, without the comprehensive overhaul that American and European hotel brands typically apply on 10 to 15-year cycles. During the renovations that do occur, specific rooms sometimes receive treatment that differs from the renovation applied to the rest of the building. The specific treatment that distinguishes the empty room's renovation from the standard renovation cycle is typically the addition of specific materials or objects within the room's walls, floor, or ceiling during construction. The practice of incorporating specific items during construction for spiritual purposes, protective objects, ritual seals, materials associated with specific religious practices, has a long history in Japanese traditional architecture. The objects that go into the walls of certain hotel rooms during renovation are placed there by workers who have been given specific instructions and who have not, in the accounts that exist, been given a complete explanation for those instructions. The rooms that receive these objects during renovation are the rooms that remain empty afterward. In Japanese ghost story tradition, the kaidan stories that have been told and retold across centuries, and that form the cultural substrate of contemporary J-horror, the room at the end of the corridor occupies a specific symbolic position. The corridor leads somewhere. Whatever is at the end of the corridor is what the corridor leads to. In kaidan tradition, the room at the end of the corridor is where the story is going, and the story is never going somewhere pleasant. Japanese hotel architects are aware of this tradition. The room at the end of the corridor in many Japanese hotels is treated with specific consideration in the design deliberately placed as a utility space, an ice machine room, an exit to the stairwell, to prevent the last room of the corridor from being a guest room. When the last room of the corridor is a guest room, it is frequently the room that occupies the hotel's specific category. The room at the end of the corridor is where the corridor goes. In certain Japanese hotels, that room stays empty because the staff understand, even if they cannot say precisely why, that where this particular corridor goes should remain unoccupied. Why do Japanese hotels leave one room empty every night? The answer is all of the above, and none of the above, and something that sits between the official explanations and the unofficial ones in the specific space that Japan maintains between the documented and the understood. The room stays empty because a guest died there, and the hotel made a decision about how to manage that history. Because the number on the door carries a meaning that the booking data documents in patterns. Because the night shift staff transmitted something to each other that they didn't put in writing. Because the renovation sealed something in the walls. Because the room is at the end of the corridor, and the corridor leads there. Because in Japan, the category of things that are known without being said is larger than in most cultures, and the management of those things, the way a country of 120 million people live alongside, what they collectively understand without collectively acknowledging, requires space. The empty room is that space. Every hotel has one. Now you know which room to ask about.